All right. First, I guess I need to unmute myself before I start talking. So here, doing everything sounds good on you on D Live, and checking everything out on YouTube. Everything sounds good on YouTube. Everything sounds good on Kick. Twitch is up, and it sounds good too. So let me hit refresh on X and see what that does. I got to do the same thing on Rumble as well. So after that, I can start the show. So there we go. It sounds good so far. X sounds good. Find out how Rumble's doing. Find out. Okay. Rumble's up and going. So we have everything ready. I already smoked my cigarette and I have my coffee. So we are ready to go. All right. So today I'm going to be going over Esoteric Agenda, and this is the second episode of it. So I hope you guys do enjoy it. What I usually do is count down and then start the show because I also edit this down so that it's a clean edit and it goes from the wonderful world of weirdness to my other channel, which I had before this one called Strange Stories. So just so you guys know. All right, so let me go ahead and get it started. 3, 2, 1, now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Esoteric Agenda. This is actually the second live stream for Esoteric Agendas. The other uploads that I've been having come out are previous attempts at streaming that I did a long time ago, and I had to go through and edit them and put them up. This is a actual live stream that's taking place on the wonderful world of weirdness on both YouTube and Rumble. If you guys want to see this again, you can see it in the live streams. Later on, I will have the edited version come out on upload at the actual playlist for Esoteric Agenda. Besides that, I'm also putting out 15-minute clips of the shows that I do here so that you'll have not only the full edited version, but shorter 15-minute versions of the conversation that's taking place, other than, stuff like this where I'm actually explaining it. So other than Rumble and YouTube, we're also on X, Twitch, and DLive, as well as Kick. Now on those, you can check out the live stream under Roger Hansen or Roger_Hansen, and except for Twitch. Twitch is actually Infamous 1969. And the only way to see my episodes on Twitch is to see them live. I don't keep a copy of the recordings for it. They've been doing some weird stuff when it comes to memory and stuff, so I just decided that I am not going to keep a copy of it because it's becoming more of a hassle on there to have them than it is to just go ahead and do live streams. And if somebody wants to check out my show, they can. Just seems better that way. So, with that being said, I am going to go ahead and start the episode. Now, last week I was getting into some pretty good stuff. I was talking about the goddess Cybele, um, and I was also uh, getting into the occult practices of Cybele's that eventually made it to Rome. And in Rome, that ended up turning into Magna Martyr, which is a story all by itself. That is pretty cool. Then I was talking about the word Ida and how it has roots in ancient languages and mythologies. Uh, Now that is associated with mountains like Mount Ida of Crete and Mount Ida in the Troad region of Assyria Minor, which is modern day Turkey, just so everybody knows. So I got there, and then I wanted to talk about Ida more. Ida was actually a pretty good topic, so I ended up getting into all of that. Now, um, what I want to do is kind of go through some of the interesting stuff. Actually, I don't know if I did discuss Ida, Mount Ida, did I? Yeah, I think I just talked about Cybele and Magna Martyr. So today I will be talking, in the first part, I'll be talking about Cybele, and then I will be talking about um, Ida, Mount Ida. I've been noticing that a lot of the stuff that's been coming up that I've been finding has a lot to do with mountain worshiping too. That's something that I will be discovering a bit more of. I'll be diving deeper into that because that holds a really, really big significance, and that's not just in a region. This is something that has been going on worldwide. So I'll be diving into that. This is going to end up being a pretty good series, I think, because it's going down avenues that I've been wanting to take for a while. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and get on to the reading so that we can get everything going. So, let me take a drink of my coffee and I'll start reading. This is okay. So here it is. During the Second Punic War, which was between 218 to 201 BCE, Rome was locked in a devastating struggle with the Carthaginians' general Hannibal, whose military campaign had brought the Roman Republic to the brink of ruin. The Roman defeats at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and especially Cannae in 216 BC was deeply traumatic, and the Roman population began to interpret these disasters as signs of divine displeasure. In the Roman worldview, such misfortunes were often seen as omens, indicating that the Dorum, Pax Dorum, the peace or favor of the gods, had been broken and needed to be restored through ritual correction or the introduction of new cults. At this time, the Senate turned to the Sibylline Books, a collection of prophetic texts believed to be of ancient divine origins, kept under the guard of special priests called the Quindecimviri Sacris Faciandis. These texts were only consulted in moments of grave crisis. Upon examining the books, the priest reportedly found a prophecy that Rome could only be saved if the Idaean mother of the gods was brought to the city. This referred to the Phrygian mother goddess known as Cybele, or Magna Martyr. The goddess Cybele was associated with mountains, fertility, wild animals, and protection. Her cult had long been established in Phrygia, modern-day central Turkey, particularly around Mount Ida, which gave her the epithet Idaean. The prophecy stated that bringing her sacred image to Rome would turn the tide of the war and restore divine favor. In response, the Roman Senate dispatched an official delegation to the city of Pergamum, a Hellenistic kingdom allied with Rome, where the sacred black stone represented the goddess, where the sacred black stone representing the goddess was kept. King Attalus I of Pergamum agreed to hand over the stone, and in 204 BCE it was brought to Rome in a solemn and heavily ritualized journey. According to legend, as the ship carried the stone approached the Tiber River, it became stuck in the mud. Only when Claudia Quinta, a Roman matron accused of sexual impropriety, publicly proved her chastity through prayer and miraculously hold up, I've got to read that again. I think I've read this before, but I messed that up too. I got excited. Only when Claudia Quinta, a Roman matron accused of sexual impropriety, publicly proved her chastity through prayer and miraculously freed the ship was the goddess's approval confirmed. This moment became a powerful narrative about the restoration of Rome's moral and divine order. The stone was first placed in the Temple of Victory on the Palatine Hill. A few years later, a full temple was constructed for Magna Martyr, foreign deity Magna Martyr, dedicated in 191 BCE, also on the Palatine. The introduction of this foreign deity marked a major turning point in Roman religious practice, and so forth. Although initially controversial due to her ecstatic rites and foreign origins, her presence was ultimately accepted as a necessary intervention to secure divine protection. The entire episode illustrates how seriously Romans took omens and divine portents, especially in times of national peril. The war with Hannibal was not only a military crisis, but also a spiritual one. By importing Magna Martyr from Phrygia in response to the Sibylline prophecy, Rome sought not just victory in war, but a reaffirmation of its place within the cosmic order, maintained through proper reverence and religious observance. The Black Stone, believed to embody the goddess Magna Martyr or Cybele, was one of the most symbolically important sacred objects in Roman religion. It was brought to Rome from the Phrygian city of Pacinus in 204 BCE during the Second Punic War in response to a prophecy from the Sibylline books. This prophecy stated that Rome would only prevail against its enemies if the goddess was brought into the city. The stone, described in ancient sources as meteoric in origin, served as a physical manifestation of the goddess and was housed in her temple on the Palestine Hill. The stone was not a carved statue, but an aniconic object, meaning it was made in the form of a human or animal. Its significance lay in its natural celestial origin. It was typically described as smooth, black, and either conical or oblong. Unlike statues that portrayed the gods in human form, this stone represented the divine through its raw and mysterious presence. It was treated as a sacred body, not just by symbol, and not just a symbol, and was kept within the sanctuary of the goddess's temple, only brought out during certain ritual processions. As Cybele's cult spread across the Roman Empire, her iconography developed into more familiar images of a matronly figure wearing a turreted crown, flanked by lions and sometimes in a chariot. However, the stone itself remained a powerful cult object, primarily revered in the context of temple rites. It never became a widespread visual symbol in the same way that statues of other deities did. With the rise of Christianity and the decline of pagan religions in the late Roman Empire, the cult of Magna Martyr was gradually dismantled. By the 4th and the 5th centuries, imperial decrees outlawed her festivals and closed her temples. The fate of the Black Stone after this time is unknown. It may have been destroyed, hidden, or simply lost during the transition to Christianity. No surviving artifact has been conclusively identified as the original stone, and no credible claim to its survival has emerged in modern archaeology or history. Although the Black Stone itself vanished, its legacy lives on in the broader cultural and religious tradition of sacred stones. Many ancient religions included such objects, believing to carry the presence of essence of a deity, of the presence or essence of a deity. Similar objects appeared in other contexts, such as the Omphalos stones in Greece. While there are comparisons, each stone held unique meaning within its cultural framework. The Black Stone of Magna Martyr functioned as a central sacred object in Roman religion, representing the goddess herself without human form. Its influence declined with the fall of Roman paganism and it disappeared from history. While the stone no longer survives, its role illustrates the ancient belief in divine presence through natural celestial objects, rather than anthropomorphic images. The word Ida has roots in ancient languages and mythologies, particularly within the context of Greco-Roman and Anatolian traditions. It is most famously associated with mountains, Mount Ida in Crete and Mount Ida in the Troad region of Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey. Both mountains hold deep mythological significance, and the name Ida is thought to have originally meant something like wooded mountain or forest hill in ancient Anatolian or pre-Greek languages, possibly Luwian or Hittite. In Greek mythology, Mount Ida of Crete was the sacred birthplace of Zeus, where the first infant god was hidden and raised in a cave by nymphs. Where the infant god was hidden and raised in a cave by nymphs to protect him from his father Kronos. This mountain became a symbol of divine protection, nurturing, and connection to the gods. The Cretan Ida was closely tied to ancient Minoan and later Greek religious practices, particularly those involving mother goddesses like Rhea and Cybele. The other Mount Ida in the Troad near Troy was also sacred and is frequently mentioned in Homeric texts. It was the setting for many myths, including those concerning the judgment of Paris, which led to the Trojan War. This mountain was associated with Cybele, known as the Great Mother or Magna Martyr in Roman tradition, and was one of her central cult sites in Phrygia. In this text, Ida became linked not just to a geographical location, but to a divine feminine and ancient mother goddess worship. In later Latin and poetic traditions, Ida sometimes functions as a symbolic or literary reference to nature, divine motherhood, and sacred geography. The mountain's name became almost interchangeable with the goddess or the goddesses and rituals associated with it, reinforcing its spiritual weight. So the word Ida ultimately denotes more than just a mountain. It embodies the idea of sacred space, divine birth, motherly care, and the spiritual bridge between earth and deity in ancient Mediterranean religions. Its meanings evolved, but always maintained the aura of sacred femininity and mythic depth. Ostanis is a legendary figure often associated with ancient Persian wisdom and is frequently cited in Greco-Roman texts as one of the earliest magi or alchemists. Although there is no firm evidence that he was a real historical person, he came to represent the archetype of an Eastern sage, especially within the context of alchemy, astrology, and esoteric knowledge. The name Astanis may have been a Greek rendering of a Persian or Median title or name, possibly used symbolically to denote a generic wise man from Persia. Ostanes appears in classical literature as a traveling magician, a purveyor of hidden knowledge. He was said to have accompanied the Persian king Xerxes during his invasion of Greece and was credited with introducing the Greeks to magical practices. Greek authors such as Pliny the Elder, Plutarch, and later alchemical writers referred to Ostanes as a master of secret arts, particularly in the realms of transmutation, the preparation of elixirs, and the spiritual dimensions of matter. The writings attributed to Ostanes, often appearing centuries after his supposed lifetime, were uh, pseudepigraphical, pseudepigraphical, that is, written by later authors. He used his name to lend authority to their work. These texts were commonly found in Hellenistic Egypt and the broader Greco-Roman world, where they merged elements of Babylonian, Egyptian, and Persian religious and scientific traditions. The alchemical teachings connected to Ostanes often emphasizes the purification of metals, the symbolic transformation of the soul, and the correspondence between cosmic and material processes. In these writings, Ostanes is often portrayed as discussing the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance believed to transmute base metals into gold and grant immortality. He is also credited with describing the stages of alchemical work, which often included operations like calcination, dissolution, coagulation, and sublimation, each with both material and spiritual implications. These processes were not only physical but also allegorical, symbolizing the journey of the soul through suffering, purification, enlightenment, and union with the divine. His teachings frequently intersected with the Hermetic tradition, particularly through the shared belief that alchemy was a divine science passed down from the gods to the earliest sages. In this light, Ostanes was not merely a technician or sorcerer, but a priest, philosopher, whose understanding of the material world was deeply tied to metaphysical truths. His writings often warn that true mastery of alchemy required moral purity, inner discipline, and spiritual insight. Though no original text of Ostanes survive from antiquity, many Arabic and Latin manuscripts of alchemy from the medieval period reference him, along other legendary figures like Hermes Trismegistus, Zosimus of Panopolis, and Democritus. These citations help form the backbone of medieval alchemical thought and contribute to the mystical aura surrounding Persian wisdom and European esotericism. Pliny the Elder, in his encyclopedic work Naturalis Hysteria, Natural History, refers to Astonis as one of the most significant early figures associated with the transmission of magical and alchemical knowledge from the East to the Greco-Roman world. Pliny presents Astonis not as a historical authority in the scientific sense, but rather as a legendary Persian magus whose teachings were seen as foundational to the spread of magical practices. Pliny mentions Astonis in several places, notably in Book 30 of Natural History, which deals with the subject of magic. According to Pliny, Astonis accompanied the Persian king Xerxes during his campaign against Greece and was responsible for the introduction of magic to the Greek world. This assertion reflects a Roman belief that much of what the Greeks knew about esoteric arts, such as astrology, sorcery, and early forms of alchemy, originated from Persian magi like Astonis. Pliny does not view Astonis or the magical arts he supposedly introduced with admiration. Rather, he treats magic with skepticism and moral disdain, considering it a corrupt and dangerous discipline that seduces even some of the greatest Greek minds. He describes Astonis as a figure whose writings led to a flood of magical literature and experimentation, which he believed ultimately degraded intellectual life by promoting superstition and fraud. Despite this negative view, Pliny acknowledges the widespread influence of Astonis. He notes that many subsequent writers of magic claim descent from Astonis's teachings, often attributing their works to him or using his name to lend credibility. This reflects Astonis's status in antiquity as a legendary authority, a kind of archetypal magus from the East whose name came to represent the hidden, arcane traditions of the ancient world. Plutarch, the Greek biographer and philosopher, writing in the late 1st and early 2nd century CE, mentions Astonis briefly in his works, primarily in passing references related to Persian magi and the broader transmission of esoteric knowledge from the East. Unlike Pliny the Elder, who directly addresses Astonis in his discussion on magic, Plutarch does not focus heavily on Astonis as a central figure, but he does contribute to the mythos surrounding Astonis by reinforcing his association with Persian wisdom and magical tradition. In Plutarch's writings, particularly in works such as Life of Numa, Isis, and Osiris, and on the obsolescence of oracles, he refers to the practices of the Persian magi, sometimes evoking names like Zoroaster and Astonis as exemplars of a deeply spiritual and ritualistic priesthood. Astonis is often rounded together with legendary Eastern sages who were believed to possess ancient mystical insights into the working of nature and the cosmos. Plutarch generally treats such figures with a measure of philosophical curiosity. He does not present Astonus in the negative tone that Pliny uses, nor does he outright endorse the magical arts. Instead, Plutarch places Astonus in a broader context of the philosophical and religious traditions that he believed form the backbone of ancient moral and metaphysical thought. Magi, in Plutarch's view, were not mere sorcerers, but spiritual guides and theologians who lived in accordance with divine order. The mention of Astonus in connection with the Persian Magi helped reinforce his status in the Greek-Roman imagination as an ancient font of arcane knowledge. Though Plutarch doesn't provide specific teachings or works attributed to Astonus, his inclusion of the name among respected mystical and priestly lineage lent credibility to the legendary status Astonus had already acquired in earlier texts. Plutarch's reference to Astonus are respectful and philosophical, casting him not as a charlatan, but as part of a sacred tradition of Eastern wisdom. He reinforces the image of Astonus as a symbolic representation of the mysteries and ancient knowledge associated with the Persian Magi, while leaving the specific content of that knowledge largely to implication. Astonus is deeply associated with the ancient alchemical tradition and is frequently cited as a master of the arcane scientist or sciences, particularly the transformative art of alchemy. His name became synonymous with esoteric knowledge, especially in relationship to the process of transmutation. In this tradition, transmutation was not limited to changing base metals into gold, but encompassed a broader understanding of the transformation of nature and the inner purification of the soul. The teachings attributed to Astonus describes transmutation as both a physical and spiritual act. The conversion of metals was seen as a mirror of the soul's journey towards perfection. Alchemical operations such as calcination, dissolution, and coagulation were interpreted symbolically, representing the stages of inner refinement. These processes were not only about crafting material substances, but also about aligning the practitioner with cosmic order and divine will. Writing under the name of Astonus include writings under the name of Astonus include instructions and allegories about elixirs, the philosopher's stone, and the secrets of longevity. These texts often integrate ritual practice, astrology, and natural philosophy, emphasizing a sacred harmony between the forces of heaven and earth. The alchemical vessel and its fire, for example, symbolizes the trial of the soul in the furnace of spiritual rebirth, where impurities were burned away to reveal a perfect essence, or a perfected essence. His teachings played a significant role in the development of Hermetic and early alchemical thought, influencing later practitioners across cultures. In these traditions, Astonis represents a lineage of wisdom in which the manipulation of matter is inseparable from moral and spiritual discipline. The goal of alchemy in this context is to achieve a union with the divine through the mastery of both physical and inner transformation. Astonis is closely linked with the early alchemical views of matter is not inert or lifeless, but infused with spiritual significance and potency. According to the teachings attributed to him, all material substances contain within them a divine essence or inner soul that reflects the cosmic order. This concept is rooted in the belief that nature itself is animated by a hidden intelligence, and that the visible world is a manifestation of unseen spiritual realities. In the spiritual dimensions of matter, as described in alchemical texts attributed to Astonis, transformation was more than a chemical change. It was a revelation of the divine qualities already present within a substance. Metals, stones, and natural elements were not just simply raw materials, but living embodiments of cosmic principles. For example, gold was not just a precious metal, it symbolized perfection, solar energy, and divine incorruptibility. Likewise, Mercury represented fluidity, transformation, and the link between the physical and the spiritual. Astonis taught that the alchemists Astonis taught that the alchemist's role was not to force change upon matter, but to assist it in fulfilling its latent potential. This process required not only technical knowledge, but also moral purity and spiritual insight. The practitioner, through rituals, prayers, and meditative focus, sought to align themselves with the divine order so that the material world would respond accordingly. Alchemy, in this view, was an act of sacred cooperation between the human and the divine, with matter acting as a medium through which spiritual truths could be realized. His teachings imply that every element of the natural world carries proper understanding and reverence. Fire, water, earth, and air each had their own spiritual correspondence and transformative powers. The process of distillation, for instance, could be seen as freeing the spirit from the body of a substance, while coagulation could symbolize the descent of the spirit into form. This theory presents a vision of the universe in which everything is interconnected and filled with purpose. To Astonis, the transformation of matter was not merely utilitarian, but mystical. It reflected a sacred cosmology in which all things aspire to return to their original divine state. The alchemist, through disciplined work and spiritual devotion, played a role in this cosmic drama, helping matter reveal its inner light and aiding the soul's ascent through understanding and unity with the natural world. In the alchemical writings attributed to Astonis, the purification of metals was described not only as a technical process, but also as a sacred ritual that mirrored the refinement of the soul. While specific recipes and steps varied across different manuscripts, a consistent theme emerges that true transmutation required the metal to be stripped of its imperfections in order to reveal its inner perfected essence. This purification was often considered the first and most essential step in the path towards creating the Philosopher's Stone or achieving transmutation. Astonis's approach began with the selection of impure metals, typically lead or copper, which symbolized the base, unrefined state of both matter and the human condition. The first stage in the process was calcination, where the metal was exposed to intense heat in a furnace until it was reduced to ash or a fine white powder. This was seen as the burning away of corruption, ego, and earthly impurity. The ash was often collected and washed in a process called ablution, which was intended to cleanse it of lingering residues, both physical and spiritual. Following calcination and ablution, the metal would undergo dissolution in a liquid, often vinegar, wine, or a specific acidic preparation designed to break down its structure entirely. This stage symbolized death and dissolution of the ego, or the material form, making way for rebirth. The solution would then be filtered and distilled, separating volatile elements from fixed ones. This process required both patience and precision, as the goal was to preserve the essential spirit or soul of the metal while removing its corrupt exterior. Coagulation followed as a final step, where the purified metal was reconstituted, ideally in a more perfected and noble form. This stage symbolized resurrection or spiritual rebirth, where the base matter had now been elevated closer to the state of gold, which was considered the ideal form of metallic life. In some variations of Astonis's procedures, a tincture of powder, what later alchemists would call the Philosopher's Stone, was added to assist or finalize the transformation. Throughout the process, practitioners were instructed to observe strict purity, both physically and spiritually. Ritual fasting, meditation, and invocations of divine names or cosmic forces were often performed alongside the chemical work. Astonis emphasized that the alchemist must be morally upright and spiritually focused, or else the matter would not respond correctly. The purification of metals was not just about altering physical properties. It was about cooperating with the hidden intelligence of nature to bring about transformation on all levels. Ostanis's teachings reflect a deep-rooted belief in the principle of correspondence between cosmic and material processes. In his view, the universe was a living, interconnected whole, and the same forces that govern the heavens also operated within the earth and its substances. This belief is captured in the Hermetic maxim "as above, so below", which appears frequently in later alchemical texts, but its conceptual foundation can be traced to thinkers like Astonis. He taught that every transformation of the material plane mirrored the larger rhythms of the patterns of the cosmos. In his system, metals were not merely inanimate materials, but embodiments of celestial influences. Each metal was associated with a planetary body. Gold was the sun, silver was the moon, iron was Mars, copper was Venus, tin was Jupiter, lead was Saturn, and quicksilver was Mercury. These correspondents were not symbolic in a modern sense, but were believed to be real, binding relationships. The physical qualities of metals, such as color, density, or malleability, reflected the spiritual characteristics of their planetary rulers. When an alchemist worked with these materials, they were in effect working with the energies of the cosmos in condensed matter or material form. In condensed material form. The processes of calcination, dissolution, sublimation, and coagulation that Astonis described were not just chemical techniques, but steps that mimicked the cycles of birth, death, decay, and rebirth that govern both nature and the heavens. Just as stars are born, age, and collapse into new forms, so too could matter be broken down and remade into a higher state. By understanding and replicating these divine patterns, the alchemists aligned themselves with the natural laws that underpinned all of creation. Astonis believed that the same intelligence that moved the stars and planets also lived within the smallest grain of matter. This led to a view of nature as not only alive, but also purposeful. The transformation of lead into gold was seen as the fulfillment of a latent destiny written into the very essence of the lead. In this sense, alchemy was not manipulation, but revelation, revealing the divine order that already existed within matter. He also taught that human beings, as microcosms of the universe, could achieve a similar transformation through spiritual discipline. The purification and elevation of metals was paralleled by the purification of the soul. Just as gold represented the most perfect state of matter, the enlightened soul represented the most perfect state of the human being. The alchemists, through inner work and outer labor, sought to mirror the cosmos within themselves, achieving harmony between the macrocosm and the microcosm. Astonis's vision of alchemy thus blurred the boundaries between science, magic, and religion. The furnace was a miniature universe. The metals were starborn, and each transformation was a reenactment of cosmic truth. His belief in the correspondence between cosmic and material processes formed the foundation for a spiritual science that saw no division between the heavens above and the matter below, only a unified order waiting to be unveiled through wisdom, purity, and reverence. Astonis's teachings included a strong emphasis on the role of divine intermediaries, spiritual guidance, and sacred rituals in the alchemical process. For him, the practice of alchemy was not merely a physical art of transforming metals, but a spiritual discipline that required the cooperation of higher intelligence or intelligences. These divine intermediaries were believed to inhabit a realm between the earth and the celestial, acting as messengers, guardians, or facilitators of transformation. They were often envisioned as spirits, angels, or cosmic intelligence associated with the planets and elements. In Astonis's worldview, the forces that govern nature were not blind nor mechanical, but animated by spiritual beings. Each element and celestial body had a presiding intelligence or daemon whose favor and guidance were essential to any successful transformation. Before engaging in any major operation, the alchemist was expected to seek the blessing of these beings through ritual, invocation, or purification. The act of transmutation, especially the quest for the Philosopher's Stone, or the perfection of base metals into gold, was considered impossible without divine favor. Alchemical work was thus as much a devotional practice as it was an experimental craft. Ritual played a central role in this process. These rituals were designed to align the alchemist's intentions with the will of the cosmos, and to prepare both the practitioner and the materials for spiritual elevation. They could include offerings of incense, prayers, chanting, or sacred names, and periods of fasting and purification. Some rituals were timed according to astrological configurations, especially during favorable planetary conjunctions, since Astonis believed these moments allowed for stronger influence from the divine intermediaries. The workspace itself was often consecrated, and tools were crafted or prepared with symbolic meaning, reinforcing the sanctity of the process. Astonis also emphasized the need for spiritual guidance, either from a master or through divine relation or revelation. The complexities of alchemy in his teachings could not be understood through reason alone. True knowledge was believed to come through illumination, an inner awakening brought about by grace or by communion with higher intelligence. The alchemist was therefore expected to cultivate a state of humility, discipline, and moral purity to become a worthy vessel for this higher knowledge. This guidance was sometimes described as coming in dreams, visions, or moments of intense contemplation, often interpreted as messages from divine sources. His view of intermediaries extended into the philosophical idea that all transformation was mediated, that nothing could pass from a lower state to a higher one without the assistance of a bridge or agent. Just as fire transforms matter or the sun nourishes life on earth, divine intermediaries were thought to act as metaphysical bridges, allowing the spiritual and the material to interact. These beings were not worshipped in the way that deities might be in formal religion, but rather revered as essential partners in a cosmic process of awakening and perfection. Ostanis regarded moments of intense contemplation as essential to the alchemical process, not just as a as a mental exercise, not just as a mental exercise, but as a spiritual state in which hidden truths could be revealed. For him, contemplation was not passive reflection, but an act of inner alignment with the deeper structures of the cosmos. These moments were understood to create a sacred stillness in the practitioner's mind, where the noise of ordinary perception gave way to visionary insight. Astonis believed that such states allowed one to penetrate beyond the visible world and make contact with divine realities or intelligence that guided transformation. Contemplation in Ostanis's system was a preparatory discipline and a form of communion. The alchemists would isolate themselves, sometimes fasting or engaging in ritual purification, and enter a meditative or trance-like state. This was a time when the spiritual eye could open, allowing the practitioner to perceive symbolic truths, receiving intuitive guidance, or even have direct inner experiences on the principles behind alchemical operations. These could manifest as images, internal voices, dreams, or a sudden and silent understanding, a kind of flash of gnosis. The knowledge gained in such moments were seen as higher than intellectual reasoning. It was considered a form of divine transmission. Astonis tied these moments to the concept of sympathetic resonance between the soul and the cosmos. He believed that by purifying the self and concentrating one's mental and spiritual energies, the practitioner could harmonize with the universe and intelligence that governs both nature and spirit. In such alignment, knowledge would descend unbidden, and the mysteries of transformation would reveal themselves not in words, but in inner experiences that transcended language. Contemplation thus became a sacred instrument, enabling the alchemist to become a participant in the cosmic creation rather than a mere observer of natural change. In some texts attributed to or influenced by Ostanis, these moments are described as visionary thresholds in which the alchemist might witness archetypal or archetypal archetypal forms, planetary spirits, or the spiritual anatomy of matter itself. They were not just seen as hallucinations, but as true insights into the metaphysical structure of reality. Importantly, Astonis emphasized that such visions could only occur to one properly prepared through ethical living, humility, ritual discipline, and sincere devotion. Contemplation, then, was both a gift and a skill, cultivated through deliberate practice, but ultimately bestowed by the divine in response to inner readiness. Through this emphasis of contemplation states, Astonis helped to frame alchemy not only as a proto-scientific endeavor, but as a form of sacred philosophy. These moments of intense inner focus were, were the portals through which the unseen could inform the seen, where the higher worlds could impress their order on the lower, and where the alchemist could glimpse the divine architecture behind all transformations. Astonis taught that all transformations, rather in nature, the human soul, or in the laboratory, required a mediated principle. He believed that nothing could shift from a lower to a higher state on its own. There always had to be an intermediary, a bridge, agent, or channel through which the energies of transformation could pass. This principle applied equally to physical substances undergoing refinement, to the soul seeking spiritual ascent, and to the cosmos itself, where celestial forces govern change and growth in the natural world through layered systems of influence. In alchemical terms, Astonis suggested that base metals could not become noble without the presence of a transforming agent. This could be a substance like mercury or a secret compound that carried within it the essence of both the fixed and the volatile, the material and the ethereal. This agent was not merely a chemical catalyst in the modern sense, but a sacred substance that embodied the mediating principle between opposites. Its role was to harmonize, bridge, and unify elements that otherwise resisted combination. This echoes the belief that divine order what must be invoked to bring harmony out of chaos. In the realm of the soul, Astonis taught that humans could not achieve spiritual elevation purely by will or intellect. A spiritual guide, divine intermediary, or celestial intelligence was required to draw the soul upward. These intermediaries were not always visible or personified, but they were part of a cosmological structure in which higher truths filtered down through levels of beings. Rituals, symbols, prayers, or inner devotion served as tools to attract the presence of such mediators. For Astonis, these beings or energies were not optional spiritual concepts, they were essential. Without them, transformation was either incomplete or corrupted. This belief also reflected the structure of the cosmos as he saw it, a descending and ascending chain of being, where each level depended on interacting with the one above and below it. Astonis likely drew from older Persian and Chaldean cosmologies, where planetary spheres or divine intelligence played the role of transmitters of light, wisdom, or life force. Every transition from darkness to light, ignorance to understanding, corruption to purity, required that something act in between, transferring the essence of one state into another without destroying either. Astonis's viewed the absence of such mediation as the cause of failed transmutations, both in the laboratory and in spiritual practice. Just as a metal would remain impure if the right agent were missing, a soul could fall into delusion if it tried to rise without proper alignment. In this way, he placed deep spiritual and philosophical meaning into the idea of mediation. The word itself was a web of such mediators. The world itself was a web of such mediators, each one participating in a chain of causality and elevation that linked the earthly to the divine. Astonis's idea that transformation was always mediated reflected a core metaphysical assumption that reality is relational and layered, and that movement between layers requires guidance alignment and a properly prepared intermediary. Whether this was a chemical compound, a planetary intelligence, or a purified state of consciousness, the mediator was essential, not just to the process, but to its legitimacy and success. Now, right here, I'm going to stop the episode and I will come back with episode 3 to Esoteric Agenda, which is going to continue with Astonis. And the thing about Astonis is the fact that he wasn't just about alchemy. He was also, he had, or the writings that were involved with him. I'm not going to say for sure if he existed or not, but according to what the writings say, he was also involved with magical arts, uh, and he was very much into what I've just been talking about with the alchemy and stuff like that. So, in the next episode, I'm going to discuss um, what he was about when it came to magic and everything to that nature. It goes a bit deeper. He was connected to the Magi, um, and he is constantly referred to as being a part of the Persian priesthoods and stuff like that. So that is what we're going to be getting into next week. Now, I'm gonna look on here and see if we've got 3 viewers on Rumble and no comments. That's fine. No comments on X. No comments on Twitch. Nothing on D Live as well, and nothing on Kick. Now we don't have anything on YouTube either, so looks like we have come to the end of the hour. I have no comments to respond to. Like I said just now, we are on Rumble, X, Twitch, D Live, Kick, and YouTube. I have the Wonderful World of Weirdness on both Rumble as well as YouTube. Not only will this stream be a live stream, but I'm also going to edit it and make it into an edited version, which I'll put on my other channel that I had before, the Wonderful World of Weirdness, where most of this originally came from, which is my YouTube channel, Strange Stories. That's on YouTube, and it's also got a group on minds.com. If you guys want to check that out, you're more than welcome to. Now, other than that, I will be streaming these episodes also on X as Roger Hansen at ROGLOL1973, as well as on Infamous 1969 on Twitch, which doesn't have any copies of the video after the live stream. It's just straight live stream, and then that's it. So you can catch me live whenever I do stream on Twitch, but there's nothing recorded afterwards. But like I said, you can find me on there as Infamous 1969. Other than that, I am on DLive as Roger_Hansen. You can find me there. And on Kick, I am Roger_Hansen as well. You can find me on that as well. So now on YouTube, You can find me at the Wonderful World of Weirdness at the Wonderful World of Weirdness. And you can also find my channel, Strange Stories, in the um, recommended channels on my YouTube channel, uh, recommended thing on the when you go to the my page, whatever they call that. But anyhow, other than that, you can also find the group on minds.com, and I am on there as Roger underscore Hanson. So if you need to find out where that group is and you can't find it on Minds, then reach out to me on there and I can send you a link to where you can get onto it. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, make comments, give some feedback. Tell your give us your take on what I've just been talking about. Heck, I mean, you don't even have to do that. Just say hi and have a conversation with me. I love talking to people in the comment section as well as in the chat section. Especially in the comment section because that stays. You know what I mean? The comments in the chat session on Rumble aren't there after the stream. So, but on YouTube it is. Uh, Either way, let me hear what you have to say. With that being said, I believe I am done for the day. I hope you guys have a good morning, afternoon, night, whatever time of the day it is for you. And I will be back next week for another episode of Esoteric Agenda. I hope you enjoyed, and bye.